costs have generally been welcomed by investors. Earlier this week, Telkom reported positive results and announced its first dividend payout to shareholders for the first time in 4 years. But it's on a collision course with Union Solidarity that has vowed to fight each and every job cut. Telkom, of course, traditionally a fixed-line operator with monopoly status, it's now trying to become more efficient as competition heats up, and the trend continues. It's been there for a while, whereby South Africans are ditching landlines for mobile services. Telkom is now focusing on high-speed internet offerings and becoming more competitive in the mobile market. Well, to discuss, we're now joined by Telkom spokesperson Jacqui Sullivan. Thank you for joining us, Jacqui.
Thanks for having me.
So just clarify, 4,400 expected to go through retrenchments or voluntary severance packages, things like that. Then you're talking about 3,400 that you're planning to exit, but they will give services to Telkom. Just explain exactly what's happening.
What we've looked at is over the last 2 years, we've undertaken this Telkom turnaround strategy, and we did what was necessary in the beginning, those urgent steps that has to be taken, whereby you look at your management structures, you look at management retrenchment, you renegotiate contracts, you get your costs under control. And we started to see the benefits, and you saw that, as you pointed out in your introduction, in our results on Monday, and being able to produce that dividend. But however, the next step that we need to take to secure the long-term future of Telkom is to admit the fact that this is a 140-year-old business. It's cumbersome. Industry has changed and telecommunications sector has changed, and we have to change with it. So what we'd spoken to Labour about yesterday in our restructuring forum is what is necessary to now move Telkom into that next phase of our turnaround. And that really requires us to change our operating model, to change how we work. And what we're looking at doing is separating it into 3 separate businesses. So we'd have our retail section, our enterprise section, and our wholesale section. Now, in our wholesale section, we've invested heavily in capital expenditure to improve that network. And what we're looking to make sure that we can do is we can provide a network that is more stable, that is staffed with multi-skilled people, but it will have the knock-on impact of requiring less people. So there are going to be retrenchments. Now, what we'd like to look at is voluntary severance packages, as you said, voluntary early retirement, and then the potential retrenchments. But the 3,400 that you mentioned, those are people who have skills that we need, but we don't necessarily need them to be working for us. So what we'd like to do is have these working group discussions with Labour, where we say to them, look, let's collaborate on how we can mitigate the impact on the workforce. So let's look at outsourcing some of those individuals. Let's put them in other companies who can contract back to us. And then let's look at this enterprise development fund that we've established called Future Makers. It's got 100 million rand behind it, so that we can take current Telkom employees and we can invest in them to create their own businesses, create a culture of entrepreneurship in the telecommunications space, and have them contract the services back to us.
Has this been very well thought through? Because Solidarity is saying service delivery already bad. Now you're going to cut jobs, it'll become even worse. There are also those old tales from Eskom. So you get rid of people, you get rid of the wrong people, they have to come back as consultants and they charge you triple what they were charging before.
I think the important thing is to recognize that this didn't start with a conversation yesterday. This started 2 years ago with the investments that we've made in the turnaround strategy and the capital investments we've been making in the network. This will not work unless we have a stable and efficient and effective network, and that's where we've been putting a lot of attention. When we get, this is a multi-year process. This isn't going to happen overnight. So we will see the exit happen over a period of time. But we're confident that with the right rehabilitated network, the right skilled people, with the right tools that are also then managed correctly, not in the cumbersome, laborious way that we see some previous big old South African companies being run, we can see that turnaround happening, and we're starting to see the results already.
It was interesting. MTN rather, affected by strike action. Some of the shops that were franchised, owned by private individuals, didn't go on strike. That actually helped MTN. Is that a consideration that you're looking at to mitigate the effect of labour action at all?
Look, at the moment, the idea would be for us to just try and make sure that we can collaborate with labour as far as possible to make sure we can avoid that kind of an impact. That owner-owned franchise system can certainly work, but we need to find a way to stabilise this economy, this telecommunications economy. There is a very clear correlation across the world and certainly within Africa by the amount of broadband penetration achieved and the impact it has on GDP. The more broadband you have, the better your GDP grows. And we need to make sure that we are investing now for the Telkom of the future that we know South Africa needs.
I want to talk about broadband because I think people are so impatient to get those speeds. But first, the job cuts. I think we can say that investors are happy with what Sipho Maseko, the CEO, has been doing. This restructuring has been going on for a while. But in this very unequal world and in South Africa where there's so much unemployment, do companies have a special duty to really try and mitigate this sort of damage? Ferial Haffajee tweeted on Monday, I think, that Telkom announcing dividends for the first time in 4 years while announcing more job cuts coming. So there's obviously money to be had, and Telkom is making a decision to keep investors happy and to let staff go. Do you feel that pressure, and is this something that the company is at least considering, the lives of those workers? There's not much opportunity out there right now.
Absolutely. The notion of paying a dividend and losing jobs does feel counterintuitive, but at the same time, what we need to do is we need to make sure that investors understand that there is going to be a Telkom to invest in 5 years' time. And we need to make sure that people understand these aren't jobs that are being lost. These are people's lives that are being impacted. These are individuals. These are people with families. So what you've mentioned about the mitigation actions is absolutely critical, because we need to look at this from a social plan perspective as well as from the perspective of how do we deliver a company that will still be here in 5 years' time to be able to deliver what we know South Africa needs, which is real broadband, real high-speed broadband.
Well, yes, because all the talk is on efficiency, but we need innovation and we need those speeds that you're talking about. So Telkom announces uncapped broadband and services, those last mile services to a few suburbs, but we've already seen rollouts in Parkhurst. Is Telkom ready to compete in this new space?
It's a really good question, because that's exactly one of the reasons why the separation of the businesses is so important. By separating our retail business, our enterprise business, which services business, and then our wholesale and networks division, what you do is you create a much more competitive environment. The industry has changed so dramatically over the past 5 years, and even over the last 18 months. 18 months, we saw communities going out for fibre to a community, and you had 3 applicants. Most recently, we saw one in Constantia. There were 25 different companies that applied to supply fibre to that community. So the competition is fierce. Telkom is going to be able to compete if it separates its business and it turns itself into a highly competitive and agile business. Innovation does not come from big lumbering corporates. It comes from, as you say, the smaller companies that are able to turn decisions around. And that kind of accountability and innovation is what we're looking to drive in the Telkom of the future.
Well, this is a chance perhaps to sell Telkom, because there's this uncapped broadband offering right now from as little as 600 Rand, but you're trying to get people, your early sign-ups. It's not really uncapped though, because if you clog up the line, and that's fair enough, if you download huge movies, I'm sure that's an example, then Telkom will throttle your speeds or slow your speeds down. Just tell me, how does that compare to the offering that's out there in South Africa? And how does that compare to people in London who can, with the click of a button, download their favorite movie from Netflix on their smart TV and watch it instantly? Where are we?
I think the fact that the world is a village, and people can be in London one day downloading at incredibly high speeds and then come back to South Africa or anywhere in Africa and have a different experience and be miserable. The key thing is that you need to compare apples with apples. That's the starting point. What we've also got to do is we've got to look at the right products for what South Africans are looking for at the moment. So as an example, we currently have quite a lot of capacity on some of our base stations. So for the first time ever, last week, Telkom has announced as the first company that we are offering LTE-A, which is 4G technology, in certain areas. So where we have a base station, where we have capacity, you can get truly uncapped LTE access, and we're making sure this is not just in leafy green suburbs. One of the areas that's covered is Alex, and we're making sure we're getting it into schools as well. The potential for what we can do with this high-speed broadband is just unbelievable. It's not just about online shopping, it's about e-learning, it's about e-health. So the potential to take this further is so huge, but we do have a long way to go. However, we're seeing the take up of fiber is fantastic. In my own home, I'm seeing 98 megabits per second. I can download a movie in a minute and a half. You know, I have a very happy husband and children, and we want to be able to make sure that we can take that into South Africans' homes, and we're starting to see great take up.
And I'm going to come and watch movies at your house sometime.
Very welcome.
Thank you very much, Jacqui Sullivan from Telkom.